welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting to you from Washington, D.C. It's the afternoon of the 16th of October, 2015. And I'll be making some announcements later in the show about some talks I'm going to be giving in Europe between the 26th of October and the 1st of November, and I'll be having more information about meetings that I hope to be able to organize, just informal gatherings, right, Café Klatsch, for people who are interested in the Tax Wall Street Party, my work, being part of an international movement, and that will be in Rome on the 26th of October, Rome, Italy, of course, and then the Frankfurt area, specifically Friedberg near Bad Nauheim, within the range of the Frankfurter S-Bahn, the public transportation. So get ready for that one and plan to attend. Plan to come out and be happy to meet you. And I can autograph books. I won't be carrying too many, but if you've got one already, please go ahead. Now, of this more as we go on. However, we now have an extremely dangerous situation here in Washington, D.C., and the way I would sum this up is that Obama is losing control of the government, or better yet, the outright insane war party is gaining control, seizing control over the government in a kind of a coup, a putsch, a policy putsch. Now, we've been fighting this all summer, as you know. We launched an action to secure the ouster of the ISIS czar, General John Allen, who was the inside man for the Petraeus neocon disgruntled generals faction and was sabotaging everything in regard to Syria. That gave us a couple of weeks of surcease. Now the problem is, ever since the Russian presence in Syria became evident and went into action attacking the terrorist rebels, that would be September 30th to October 1st, approximately, a little bit more than 2 weeks. We've got this hysterical Pavlovian reaction by the neocons, by the humanitarian bombers, and other elements in the bureaucracy. It is the case, therefore, that Obama is losing control of the government. Now, of course, I've had more than one idiot savant write to me saying, "Oh, Obama never controlled the government. He's just a leftist," and all this other stuff. This is absolute nonsense. We're not talking about control of everything. We're not talking about, a command economy approach to the federal institutions. It's just, can you have some influence on the strategic decisions? And above all, do you still have a veto against possible war? And that is the question. Now, the thing that points most to this is, as a symptom, the fact that Obama has extended the mission of 5,500 U.S. troops in Afghanistan and is now going to keep them there into 2017 or perhaps through 2017. This is an extremely ominous sign. This shows that the neocon fascist madmen, neocon fascist warmongers in particular, and their humanitarian bomber allies have now got the upper hand. Okay? Washington Post this morning, militant gains prompt president to shift course. If you listened to the National Public Radio International Hour and Domestic Hour this morning, the Diane Rehm Show, you will have heard not just David Ignatius, Washington Post speaking tube for the intelligence community, but also others saying Obama didn't want to do this. This was painful for him. It was humiliating. He doesn't like this idea. And Obama, therefore, forced to go out there and say, Afghan forces are still not as strong as they need to be. And therefore, while the Taliban have made gains, they can still launched deadly attacks in cities including Kabul. This is Ashton Carter. This is the Petraeus clique. Ashton Carter, there, the cat who ate the canary, he triumphs. He got his way. He's a warmonger. So this is the Afghan side of it. It is extremely ominous. It's ominous. It's bad in itself, and it's a very bad sign for the dynamics of the way things are going. Obama could have said, let the Chinese defend their own investments, right? Let an international peacekeeping force be put in there, or some other thing, right? There would have been ways, but no, not with Ashton Carter. And then we have the case of Kerry. This is equally or more disturbing when we get right down to it. We have this character also on National Public Radio, National Pentagon Radio, I guess. Steve Inskeep, Inskeep. And I retweeted this. You can see it on the Webster G. Tarpley Twitter parade. So Steve Inskeep writes that when Kerry was asked a question at, I think it's the University of Indiana. Anyway, it's some educational institution. The question was, do you believe, Mr. Secretary Skull and Bones Kerry, do you believe that the United States should send ground forces into Syria at this time? And here's the answer in quotes from this Steve Inskeep of National Public Radio. Quote, will we need to put enablers on the ground? Question mark. I think so. I think so. Period. The president hasn't made the decision yet. Fire him. He's out of here. Fire him. Get him out. This is not what pertains to him. That decision the president must keep in his own hands and not delegate it to meddlers and careerists and male models, whatever, this character, right? The old face man from Yale and Skull and Bones. And I'm repeating it now. This is shocking. Quote, will we need to put enablers on the ground? Question mark. I think so. The president hasn't made the decision yet. So that's the version from Steve Inskeep. Now, in the Diane Rehm show this morning, National Pentagon Radio, we had the following version of the same thing, which came from this David Ignatius. His version was that Kerry had been asked more or less the same thing. Do we need to send troops? Does the United States, should the United States send troops, ground troops, to Syria? And Kerry's answer, according to Ignatius, was not yet. Not yet. So we are on the slippery slope. Now, there's stuff about enablers. An enabler, is that the new term for ground troops? Is that the new term for a brigade, a battalion of enablers, a division of enablers? This is obviously getting very, very Orwellian. So, Obama has now got two top cabinet members, and that would be Kerry at State and Ashton Carter at the Pentagon, who are now reverting to their outright warmonger ways. Ashton Carter also says some stuff about we've got a lot of work ahead of us in Afghanistan, but we better not have a lot of work for ourselves in Afghanistan. And we'll be back in a minute. Back to World Crisis Radio. Maybe the best way to summarize the situation in Washington is that the war party, the unprincipled satanic alliance of neocon, fascist madmen and warmongers on the one hand, and the humanitarian bomber, hypocrites and double standards people, they're joining together to push Obama towards military action, which any fool can see that he doesn't want to take. And I have nothing but scorn for the idiots who continue to attack Obama. For God's sake, attack the warmongers that are forcing these decisions through. We did it with Allen, with limited resources. We catalyzed enough to get him out. At least we think he's not quite out yet, but it looks like this is going to be the end of his tenure. But now we've got Ashton Carter and we've got Skull and Bones Kerry reverting to true Skull and Bones form. So this is intolerable. We've got the Afghan decision. They're going to stay through or into 2017. 6,000 U.S. forces. Very bad symbol. The triumph of Ashton Carter. He now says we got a lot of work to do there. And then, once again, quote, will we need to put enablers on the ground? Question mark. I think so. The president hasn't made that decision yet. And that is by Inskeep, he says, that is Secretary of State John Kerry answering a student's question about whether there's a need for U.S. boots on the ground in Syria. It means war. And this is relegated to a side remark on one program. This is absolute insanity, right? This is the world gone mad. Now, the other one is the Turkish government says they shot down an aircraft today along their southern border with Syria. And, of course, what was it? Was it a drone? And if so, what country? We've got all the neocon fascist madmen, all their relay stations are now sending out the signal, it was Russia, time for confrontation. Dear friends out there, this is looking like a very ugly and very dangerous situation. Problem is, we don't have any serious mass organizations who would be able to speak against this. It's now left into the hands of you, the people who have the most to lose. Look at your wife, look at your children, look at your home, look at yourself in the mirror, think about the future, think of the country. You got to do something about this. A certain amount of time spent on social media this weekend might be one of the best investments you've ever made, and it might be a good idea to do that. It might be a very useful kind of, I wouldn't even say insurance policy, but some contribution to your own future welfare. They're all saying with David Ignatius, Obama was pained. He didn't want to do it. So therefore, it's going to be a longer stay. Another thing from Ignatius, which I thought is interesting, he's got an article in the Washington Post, so far only on the website. I guess it'll be in the printed paper tomorrow. That is the 17th of October. Sorry. What Ignatius writes is that the reason that the $500 million program, now abandoned, thank God, was not successful was because the U.S. had very poor intelligence about the Nusra Front, Jabhat al-Nusra, the al-Qaeda affiliate. I wonder what these 9/11 families are thinking, saying, doing. Wouldn't they like to have a demonstration that this is pure insanity based on what they've been told? Anyway, here's the point from Ignatius. The United States had poor intelligence about Jabhat al-Nusra, the al-Qaeda affiliate that is a dominant force in the north. The moderate rebels walked into a trap in late July because they didn't expect to be attacked by Nusra fighters. That should have been anticipated. So look, these are the people who wanted to have a war over the Ghouta chemical weapons fake provocation. Plenty of voices, including David Ignatius, right? Bomb Assad, based on lousy intelligence. And now they have the gall to come forward with this. Why are you still writing a column? Why don't you resign if that's the best you can do? Now, of course, in terms of who attacked these fighters, or probably Nusra attacked them, but there were two stories. One is that the Turkish forces leaked out when they would be coming so the Nusra people could just mow them down, and or the U.S. forces leaked when they would be coming because they didn't trust them and wanted to get rid of them, or some other reason. So as a result of this week's decisions, the United States will keep garrisons in Bagram, in Kandahar, in Jalalabad. This is now open-ended. And isn't it wonderful to have the U.S. military protecting the investments of those Chinese investors? Isn't it time to think about national interest rather than this mythology that Al-Qaeda is somehow located in Afghanistan? I think even the think tanks here in Washington would agree that that is not true. Now, on the other hand, we've had 16, 17 days of Russian military operations against the terrorist rebels. I hate to quote a sleazy fellow like Congressman Ed Royce of California, but he does have some point when I'm going to have to alter his quote a little bit because his is too extreme, that the Russians have accomplished more in 2 weeks than the United States did in a year of bombing. And he thinks that should be blamed on Obama. Fine. But look who actually did it. This is Allen. This is John Allen, the ISISar. This is the Petraeus clique. This is General Breedlove. These are other commanders who make these decisions. So the phony war policy, I don't know if this was dictated by Obama, but certainly the role of these disgruntled, politically ambitious generals, insubordinate generals, right? The people we heard talking through the voice of General McChrystal about Vice President Bite Me. Remember that? Okay, so that's the view they all have. They're insubordinate, and we have a big tradition of civilian control. This is bad news. So the Russians say that they have now done 380 targets. This is not even sorties, but targets that have been hit by their ordnance. The Assad army, the Syrian Arab army, for whom I have respect and indeed admiration, I learned that in the military hospital in Damascus back in November of 2011. They're advancing. The Syrian Arab army is pushing the rebels to the east, out of the Homs to Hama area, and they're also advancing to the north towards Aleppo. We'll be back in just a minute on World Crisis Radio. Back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Now, we obviously ought to point out what could be done. Obama is going to have to start acting like President of the United States. I realize this is a novel challenge for Obama, but he's got to do it. The government is slipping into the hands of these warmongers. Obama's influence apparently dwindling fast. This is what you get, of course, for appointing people like Skull and Bones Kerry or the utopian warmonger and pedant Ashton Carter, egomaniac, narcissist, and so forth. We've got to have some high-profile firings. Obama ought to know what 1, 2, or 3 people he ought to fire. I'm thinking of President Ford's Halloween massacre. What is that? That's about 40 years ago this month, I'm guessing, right? I think it was Halloween 1975 when that happened, right? A whole bunch of very dubious people were kicked out by President Ford. Kissinger was cut down to size. Schlesinger was ousted. A whole bunch of interesting things. Well, Obama needs a Halloween massacre. He needs to fire some of the leading warmongers. This woman, Samantha Power at the United Nations, is a national disgrace. She has failed, and I have a commentary in today's morning briefing, and it's a commentary that I did for Press TV on the 14th, a couple of days ago now, that the United States is so churlish and so petty and so stupid above all, and so devoted to terrorism, that she is refusing. Samantha Power refuses to even sign a letter deploring the mortar attack, I guess it is, or shelling of the Russian embassy in Damascus. She won't deplore that because she objects to the idea that it was a terrorist attack. And because she knows that the people who shot off those shells or mortar rounds, those people are U.S. backed, right? That's the CIA program. So we are now getting to the point where the United States government is openly in favor of terrorist groups, right? And again, I wonder what's going on with those 9/11 families. Why don't they come forward and hold a press conference and say, we've had it, right? No more support for Al-Qaeda. Again, I'm simply basing this on what those people believe and what they have been told, not necessarily the reality of it, but there's still plenty of reason for anybody with any standing in the public eye to come forward and say, no, we don't want that to happen. No more support, not one penny more, and not one bullet and not one rifle for Al-Qaeda anywhere. So now, the other thing is, and this is the theme of this conference in Rome that we're going to get to. Let me just jump ahead to that. In October, and I believe into November also, we're going to have a very big NATO exercise centered in the Mediterranean and to some extent in the North Atlantic. It's called Trident Juncture 2015. Trident Juncture, one of the biggest military exercises in many decades. There are competing estimates of how far back you have to go. Some say since 1945, some say since 2002, somewhere in there. 36,000 NATO and satellite or puppet troops, 36,000 NATO troops, 140 aircraft, 60 naval vessels, 30 nations. And it's designed to show the transformation of NATO as a response to the hybrid warfare, so-called, the hybrid warfare deployed by Russia and Putin in the Ukraine. So they say we have to get ready for that. Under French Air Force General Denis Mercier, Supreme Allied Commander for Transformation, so SAC-T, this is in a press conference roundtable that he held. Now look, this drill has to be called off. All the people out there who have learned the lessons of the drills, right? We know that when the drill goes live, when the drill is taken live, that's when the false flag occurs. That's when the Gulf of Tonkin occurs. I'm thinking about Hilex 75. That was denounced in the German press as a backdoor to a confrontation with the Soviet Union. And then even better documented, Able Archer 83, which was a similar drill, similar to Hilex, an escalation towards nuclear war with the Soviets. The Soviets saw it. They were so impressed by the realism, they thought it was the real thing because that's how these things are done. And they went to their top level of readiness, right? Red alert and so forth. So this is now going to be the subject, and let me just get this in here while we can. It's going to be in Rome on Monday, the 26th of October, and it's going to be it's from 10 o'clock in the morning till 6 o'clock at night. It's a very impressive international conference, organized, I think, from my point of view anyway, by Giulietto Chiesa, former member of the European Parliament, a friend, good friend, who has done a great deal, and he has a fine staff. He works with people like Pino Cabras of megachip.info. This is an excellent operation. So they're putting this together, and the idea is it's time to break up NATO, and it's time to act against war. So here's some people. And if you look at the people that they've invited, it's an extremely impressive list. Now, not all can come, but it is a work in progress. The confirmations are continuing to come in. So that's where I'm going to be on Monday, the 26th of October. And let me just tell you where, if you're thinking about dropping by, that would be Centro Convegni Cavour. Okay? Centro Convegni Cavour. So the conference center, the Cavour Conference Center, via Cavour, C-A-V-O-U-R, right? 50A, Rome, Italy, October 26th, 2015, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And you can find this on various websites. We can find it on mine. You go to tarpley.net and then follow some of that stuff, and you will be on your way. So there's a whole bunch of details about Sicily in here, and I also would call your attention to today's briefing, where I write some stuff about how what I've said here about Hilux 75, about Able Archer 83, how the drills go live. So that's the other thing to do. So Obama needs to make some high-profile sackings. High-profile firings are needed to reestablish executive authority over this government. Otherwise, the neocon faction, and this is people who go off the reservation, right? Commit treason, whatever you want to call it. They're happy to do that. They want war. That's all they know. They're one-trick ponies. Had enough? Did you have enough of them in the Iraq war? Well, if you did, you better show it right now and do something. Anybody who can get on Twitter, anybody go on Facebook, put it out some way or other and get to work. So that, I think, would be at least a first approximation. The other thing, of course, is put the pressure on these peace fakers, right? The peace groups here in the United States are a disaster. So we need them to mobilize also. Okay, back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. And now we have a special report from the cynosure of world politics these days, which is Syria and specifically Damascus. We're very happy to be joined once again by our good friend and esteemed colleague, Thierry Maison. Thierry is the leader of the Voltaire Network, and he has been living in Damascus for the past 4 years, approximately. He's probably the only Western reporter to have done that. He has been a consultant to the Syrian government. And the thing that I think we can focus on today is we hear a lot about the military campaign, right? The Russian military campaign, how that is fitting together. And I think Thierry has an unparalleled view of that, which I would be very happy for him to lay out for us now. So Thierry, welcome, and please go ahead and give us that rundown.
Thank you, Webster. So since now 3 weeks, the Russian militaries are deployed in Syria, and they began to bomb the jihadists from all the different groups, of course Daesh, but also Al-Qaeda or Ar-Sham. In fact, nobody knows what is really happening now in Syria, because there is something totally new, totally different from the past. The Russian militaries have deployed a special system to scramble, to jam all the communication in Syria. So right now, all the military communication, the radars, the satellites, everything is jammed, is scrambled. And the result is that NATO don't know what is happening inside Syria since 3 weeks. So this is very, very important, because this means that Russia has a new weapon able to stop all the communication system of NATO, and this means that Russia now is the main military power in the world. You understand what I am saying? Because right now, NATO is totally blind, and if NATO tries to do something inside Syria, they can't do it. So at the beginning, when the Russian military entered in Syria, there was an agreement between Russia and the US to destroy the jihadists, but never the US were thinking that the Russian militaries are so powerful. And it's surprising for everybody because if you remember in 2008 during the Ossetia War, when Georgia attacked Ossetia, the Russian militaries were able to disband them, but at that time everybody see the very low quality of the Russian weapons at that time. It was only 8 years ago. And right now, the Russian militaries, they have a very high level of technology. You know certainly about the Sukhois, the planes they have, but
right.
They have now also this technology for communication. So since the beginning of the military operations, the jihadists are certainly largely disbanded. But in fact, we have no way to confirm the facts. We are totally dependent of what the Russian and the Syrian militaries agree to say, and they said very few things. Because of course they want to continue with their advantage to know, to see everything, and to be alone to see everything. The jihadists, certainly they have already more than 5,000 killed. More than 10,000 are already going away to Turkey, Iraq, and Jordan. We know also that a lot of bunkers were destroyed because during this war, United States, France, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia helped to build bunkers for the jihadists, and they build also some factories for the ammunitions. All of these things were totally destroyed by the Russian bombing. But we don't know exactly where are now the jihadists inside this very big territory. We know there's some places there is some fight, but really it's difficult to have precise information. The only good information we have is that NATO is totally blind. And you remember also that 2 weeks ago, the Russian fleet from the Caspian Sea sent 26 missiles in Syria. Until now, only the U.S. militaries were able to do such thing. But the Russians decide to strike jihadist facilities in Raqqa, in the north east of Syria, and the cruise missile from Russia go through Iran, through Iraq, until Syria, and they destroy every target. So just after that, CNN said that no, it's not possible. The Russians lose a lot of missiles in Iran and so on.
Right.
But the Russians react immediately, and finally, the U.S. State Department recognized that all the missiles go to the perfect target in Raqqa. Raqqa is at the east of the country, so in that part of the country, the jamming system is not effective. The jamming system is in Latakia with 300 kilometers around Latakia. 300 kilometers. This includes the NATO bases of Incirlik at the Turkish border. You remember also that by the past everybody knows that the Russians were experimenting that kind of weapon, because in April 2014, when the U.S. Navy tried to stop the attachment of Crimea to Russia, there was a problem between a Russian Sukhoi and a Navy, a vessel from the U.S. Navy, the USS Donald Cook. And this Sukhoi arrived around this vessel, and they stopped all the electronic and electromagnetic system of this vessel. So the USS Donald Cook was totally alone in the sea and was not able to use his own weapons. And at that time, the Sukhoi tried 12 times to show how they will send missiles against the USS Donald Cook. You know, it was a demonstration. Of course, they don't fire the missile. So,
Kerry, hang on 1 second. I'd like to keep you over just a little bit because I asked you some questions about this. We'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C. Now, this is extremely important news we've gotten from Kerry. In other words, a Russian jamming system that covers satellites and land communications, and it's been deployed. And this, of course, changes the world military balance in favor of Russia and against the United States. This would be a good time to back off from this warmonger rhetoric that we're hearing from Ashton Carter. Now, Thierry, you were telling us, first of all, that the system had been used before against the destroyer Donald Cook in the Black Sea, and then you were also talking about a Russian delegation that was going to come here with Medvedev to do the negotiating on the military technicalities, but that this was called off by the U.S. So could you please fill us in on those?
Yes. The Russians sent a military delegation first to Turkey to discuss the way to make the war against the jihadists. Of course, they know that Turkey is supporting the jihadists, but they propose this to their army. And just after that, the Turkish militaries make a report to the U.S., and the White House cancel the trip of the same delegation plus Prime Minister Medvedev to Washington, because in fact the Russians want to negotiate with the U.S., but the U.S. have no information at all. The U.S. are totally blind about what is happening 300 kilometers around Latakia. So the situation is that for the first time the U.S. are not the main militaries in the world, and they are not able to accept this right now. So certainly they are trying to find a solution. There is some weakness inside the Russian system, but the fact is that right now the Russians are able to jam the U.S. communication system, including the satellites, but the U.S. are not able to do the same thing against the Russians.
And Thierry, you mentioned this incident in the Black Sea with the U.S. destroyer and how this was a rollout.
Yes, because when this incident occurred, it was clear that Moscow has new weapons for jamming the communication, but it was a very small spot on the Black Sea. And suddenly we discover that they are able to do such thing 300 kilometers around, and they are also able to do such thing with the satellites. So this changes all the conception we can have before about the Russian weapons.
All right. Now, a quick look here reveals that it was General Breedlove, the 4-star general who is the NATO commander. I believe he's part of the Alan Petraeus clique, but he made a statement as this was all starting on September 29th. Here's from Breedlove. He says, "We see the very capable air defense systems beginning to show up in Syria. We're worried about an A2/AD bubble being created in the Eastern Mediterranean." Now, A2AD is anti-access /area denial. It's like a moat around a castle. It keeps people out. Now, Breedlove says that there have been these interdiction communications areas are bad, but they've seen them before from the U.S. point of view. There's an anti-ship cruise missile system which covers the entire Black Sea, right? Crimea, based in Crimea, and then there's another one at the Russian naval base in Kaliningrad, right, in the Baltic. So this would be the third. Obviously a big change, right? The ability to create that in Latakia, right, in that coast of Syria along the Mediterranean, a big shift in the world military balance. And I believe most of you heard it first right here, thanks to Thierry. So, anything to add?
I think also that for all the allies of the U.S., to understand that the U.S. are no more the biggest militaries in the world will have some consequences. Certainly, some member of NATO will try to quit NATO in the next year, because there is no more interest for them to be member of such a fake alliance where they have always to obey and they are not considered as equal a member state like the US and the UK.
Jerry, this is a very, very timely thing. We have this conference in Rome. Maybe you know about it. On Monday, the 26th of October, we have this anti-NATO conference. Your friend Manlio Dinucci, who writes for the Réseau Voltaire, is going to be there. And actually, I'm going to be there. So maybe that will be a very timely thing.
Yes. Yes. So it's a little short to understand all the consequences of this new balance of militaries in the world, but certainly this will change a lot of things. Of course, for the US, they need some years to find the same weapons. They need some years. It's not possible to create new weapons in 1 week, you know. So certainly it could be the beginning of the end of U.S. imperialism.
Well, and that would be a welcome event, right? The return to a normal multipolar world, ending this monopoly, which is the people who have fared worst under that from some points of view are the American people. This has not been a good thing, and no nostalgia about this.
No.
All right, Thierry.
Yes. And last thing, in the last days, some U.S. militaries drop weapons to the jihadists. That's clear. But we don't know.
Supposed to be in northeastern Syria, right?
Yes, but we don't know if this was a decision from the White House or if as militaries have some stock they send to the jihadists like that. It's unclear. So
Kerry, this is what a lot of the program so far that I'm sorry you couldn't hear. We're talking about this idea that Obama is losing what little control he had over the United States government, and we're getting the war party with Ashton Carter, Kerry, Samantha Power, and others, essentially an anarchy, right? In other words, a putsch. We're living through a putsch.
Absolutely, that's very clear. right now, most of the trouble in the greater Middle East are the consequences of the division inside the U.S. administration. That's very clear.
All right. So let us invite you back next week if you can, and we'll get more about this. But thank you very much for this really illuminating overview. So we'll see you next week. And stay safe. Best of luck.
Goodbye. See you next.
Bye-bye. See you soon. All right. Kerry Mason. And as I said, you can look at this. The article that I was reading from about breed love is from the Washington Post on the 29th of September. This kind of a shock, right? I did a compilation of this, the Spanish world domination went from 1494 or thereabouts until, 1660 or thereabouts, 1650, 1660. Then it was the French that ended by about 1712. Then the British, were living through it. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. Now we have another excellent international guest, and that is our friend Stanislav Bishok. Stanislav Bishok, one of the world's greatest experts on what goes on in Kiev. I guess his book, Nazis on the Maidan, has essentially told the story of the attempted color revolution, destabilization of Ukraine back at the beginning of 2014. And he is also associated with the election monitoring organization of the Commonwealth of Independent States. And we'd like to get an insight into Kiev and what's going on there, but also Donbass. We want to keep up with our friends there. And then perhaps the Russian view on Syria, if we can squeeze it in. Stanislav, welcome. Please take over. You have the floor.
Thank you very much for having me once again. It's a pleasure and it's an honor. And, let's begin with Donbass then.
Great.
Just recently I have spoken to some representatives of the Donbass People's Republic. I spoke to Konstantin Dolgov, who is an official representative of the Foreign Ministry of Donbass People's Republic, and we spoke about the Minsk II peace agreement and with the overall situation there in the region. And he acknowledged that despite the fact that the situation has been tense, but still there were no real hard fights between the Donbass militia, between the Donbass army and the Kiev army, and the peace agreements are beginning to be implemented. Sure, it doesn't come easy. I mean that there has been a lot of criticism from both Kiev and Donbass, and nobody is 100% content with the agreements themselves and with the process of their implementation. But still, as a matter of fact, and people in Donbass and the officials of Donbass, they are quite aware that there is no other option than to try to adhere to those agreements which were signed and which were assured by President Putin, by Chancellor Merkel, and by President Hollande. So it's the only document in the world, according to which is devoted to this situation in Donbass, on which people in Donbass could restore peaceful life. So it's the only document which exists in the world.
Okay, and what can we say about what's going on in Donbass? I mean, in the Donetsk People's Republic is the one that my listeners know most about. How are they doing? I mean, in economic life recovering, or other things we could point to?
Well, actually, as a matter of fact, with a little help from their friends from Russia, sure, they can counter Russia in a humanitarian way, primarily, and there have been, I believe, 41 humanitarian convoys from Russia to Donbass. So people don't, thank God, people don't starve there. Some refugees begin to return to their homes, begin rebuilding their peaceful life there, trying to get some job there, and even some people from the central parts of Ukraine, for example, who are not from Donbass, but who don't have work there in Ukraine, they go to Donbass because they know if they can work as workers, as builders, for example, so they can work there in Donbass People's Republics as just helping to rebuild houses and some other broken apartments and so on. So the life there is, by and large, becomes, well, I cannot say it is as good and as decent as it used to be 2 years ago and earlier, but still it is not the region is not in the state of war this time these days, and people can somewhat breathe freely now.
All right. Now, that is an extraordinary thing. Refugees are going to Donetsk, leaving the Kiev fascist clique area and looking for jobs as construction workers in Donetsk. And I guess it's the convoys and I think the polite people who have been helping over there. I hope so. Now, let's just switch to Kiev, right? The big question was, Europe is saying to the U.S. and everybody else, let's normalize things with Assad. Let's stop trying to overthrow Assad. Let's lift the sanctions on Syria. Let's lift the sanctions on Russia. These are absurd. So the idea was, will Poroshenko be able to stage some kind of a provocation to try to stop that peaceful process from going on? Do you have a reading on that?
Well, yes. I mean, if we try to go back in time, in 2 years or a year and a half, we could see that during the process of the Maidan Revolution, the interests of, let's say, Brussels and Washington officials were by and large the same. They wanted to throw Ukraine away from, to turn Ukraine away from Russia and to to build up some kind of sanitary cordon between Russia and the West. But when the war broke, the interests of Brussels and of Washington became somewhat different, because from my perspective, the Washington officials, they are quite comfortable in having some kind of war zone in the distant part of a distant continent, European continent. But people in Brussels and obviously the inhabitants of the European Union, they are quite uncomfortable, to put it mildly, with the war which is going on their very borders.
Okay, Stanislav, I'm sorry we're out of time, but this was very interesting to hear about Donetsk, and please, we'll have you back soon in the very near future for more about this. Thank you very much. Stanislav Bishok in Moscow. Thank you once again. And we'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Highly interesting international reports. But now let's look at some domestic. Look at the daily briefing of the Tax Wall Street Party. We put out a live tweet of the Democratic debate. The main thing coming out of this is that Bernie Sanders is now openly declared pretty much as a stalking horse for Hillary Clinton. He is a border guard. He is a point person. He's for Hillary. A stalking horse was the term that was used in recent times, right? So when the email question and the private server came up, you could see this was the big chance for the entire group of them, O'Malley and Webb and Link and all the rest of them. That's when they could have taken Hillary apart and done her some permanent damage. At that point, Bernie piped up to say, no, this is not a legitimate issue. I don't want to hear about these emails. Then there was the famous handshake to seal the deal. And later on, his mantra, and the secretary is right. You may remember Dennis Kucinich, similar figure to Bernie, guy who said he was running for president. By the time we got to the Iowa caucuses, Kucinich essentially dropped out. On the eve of the Iowa caucuses, he threw his support to Obama in 2008. And it's just a question of time until the party apparatus and the superdelegates in the Democratic Party push Bernie to do the same thing. In the meantime, his main activity is recruiting for Hillary. In other words, to reactivate those voters that were duped by Obama in 2008. They're now deeply disappointed. Bernie's job is to reactivate them and convoy them back into the Democratic Party so that they can work for Hillary. This essentially means that there will be no social change. If Bernie believes in any of those issues, why doesn't he simply say, I don't know if I can support Mrs. Clinton because she's against me on the issues. Trump could do it, but Bernie, of course, a weak entry, couldn't do it. We didn't hear anything about filibustering the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We didn't hear a militant strategy of calling a demonstration and filibustering on the inside. And, of course, nobody asked them, what about your embrace of those Saudi butchers? They're carrying out genocide in Yemen, and we've got political prisoners that we'll be highlighting in the daily briefing of the Tax Wall Street Party. We'll be giving you portraits of the people that the Saudi regime wants to kill. All right, some other issues here. Benghazi, of course, is a fraud. Congressman Mitchell revealed it was a fraud. Now we got Representative Hanna, Republican of New York, saying this was a pure partisan fishing expedition paid for by the American people. Obviously, they don't get to the truth because the truth is Petraeus, the head of the CIA, gave the stand-down order, as is believed, to essentially say those paramilitaries don't intervene. The other side of it is the Huma Abedin, Congressman Weiner's wife, who is the body person for Hillary Clinton, as it's called. She's obviously a back channel. The U.S. has been in an alliance with the Muslim Brotherhood for these many years, maybe going back to Nasser. It's very strong these days. Huma is there as a back channel. And this is pretty much the obvious story. Rand Paul in a death spiral. Rand Paul, he says that the reports of his political demise are exaggerated, but I think not by much. He did this day-long webcam expose of himself, complained about it, went to Drake University and said once again that property rights trump all other rights, and this time it was about LGBT. If you get fired, he says, if you get fired, well, then go find a job somewhere else. It's exactly the point. He does not support the public accommodations feature of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. All of that posturing, all of those visits, the Time magazine cover cannot cover it up. Now, Jeb Bush has come out with his version of Obamacare. He does not ban the pre-existing condition proviso that essentially means that if you get sick and you don't have insurance, you never will be able to get insurance. He wants to have continuous coverage. But what if you can't afford continuous coverage, Jeb? And, of course, medical savings accounts and other things, tax deductions, those work well for people with money. But the 50 million at the rock bottom, 40 to 50 million, they can't do that. That doesn't help them. Now, Stu Rothenberg has come up with an interesting thing. This is now in the pages of Roll Call magazine. He says, look, the Freedom Caucus of extremists, the fascists in my book, extreme Tea Party lunatics, they believe they're getting stronger and they will not cooperate, right? So we're heading towards a possible U.S. default. starting on November 3rd. The crisis will be in high gear, at least. And then the question of shutting down the government around December 11th. Rothenberg's formula is, let the Republicans nominate a Cruz-Jindal ticket, extreme right-wing, proto-fascist, extreme reactionary, and then let them get defeated, and maybe that will show them that they're wrong. Well, this, of course, an intriguing thing. It will be like 1964, he says, that this Cruz-Jindal will get defeated by a landslide. I wish I could be guaranteed that because of the fecklessness of the Democratic candidates, but still, the big question is, what will promote the collapse of the Republican Party as a national party? And this might. What we're all looking for is the Winfield Scott of the Republican Party today. Winfield Scott, you remember, was in the Whig Party. He was a famous general and did great service to the United States in the Civil War, right? He designed the so-called Anaconda policy, the blockade, and the conquest of the Confederacy. But in 1852, he was running for president. He revealed himself like so many generals. He was not politically very smart. And that destroyed the Whig Party. The Whig Party was destroyed by the crushing defeat of Winfield Scott in 1852. Maybe the crushing defeat of Cruz and Jindal could put an end to the Republican Party as a national party. And I would embrace it more enthusiastically. It's just I've always seen the Democratic Party selling out and snatching defeat from the jaws of victory in that sense. Again, November 3rd, default crisis begins December 11th. There is no Speaker of the House. Ryan keeps saying no because he sees that the extremists of the Freedom Caucus are going to sabotage him. They will not make the commitments that he wants. We may be stuck with Boehner or Weimar, because that's what it is. Weimar is here. When you can't elect the Speaker of the House, in this case, the lower house of your parliament, then you have Weimar. In other words, the center has collapsed, the extremists have taken over, and you can't get anything through. I mean, and forget about getting it through. You can't even elect somebody who's going to be the speaker of this distinguished assembly. So we are in Weimar, and the answer to Weimar is economic recovery. You want to be locked into this dictatorship, depression, dictatorship, and war. You've got to treat the depression. And to get a recovery from the depression, you're going to need $6 trillion from the Fed on a 0% century bond basis as needed. You're going to have to rebuild the entire infrastructure, the roads, the ports, the railroads, the airports. The entire U.S. infrastructure has to be rebuilt. The science drivers of plasma physics, high energy physics, and biomedical and space exploration. All of that financed with 0% Federal Reserve credit. And we'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to our final segment here on World Crisis Radio. Let me quickly point out that we have two events coming up, right? One is the event in Rome on Monday, the 26th of October. That is the No Guerra and No NATO conference. You can find the address on tarpley.net. So that's very timely, as we've just been discussing. That's on from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Monday, the 26th of October. A lot of very important people will be there. Others have been invited. Maybe not all will come, but the tendency is for some important ones to come. And then on the other side, on Friday and Saturday, that is to say Halloween, the 31st of October, and then November 1st, I will be speaking this time in Germany, and this will be at the Frankfurt area. And if I can call this one up, let's see if I can. The This is going to be in the Frankfurt area, that is within the realm of the Frankfurt S-Bahn. The Frankfurt conference, the Frankfurt area conference, is actually going to be held in Friedberg, F-I-R-E-D-B-E-R-G, Friedberg in Hesse, right, in Hessen. And that's at the Stadthalle Friedberg am Seebach number 2. And this will be on the 31st of October and the 1st of November. The conference is the Querdenken TV Congress. So, what can we say? I would say bipartisan thinking is the idea of this. Bipartisan, inclusive, spanning left and right, TV Congress. So that's going to be, I think my speech is on November 1st, but please, keep in touch with me on Twitter and indeed on Facebook, and I'll be telling you, for example, the opportunity to have an informal gathering with contacts, sympathizers, friends of the broadcast, people who want to learn more about the Tax Wall Street Party, and so forth. So, both in regard to Rome on around the 26th, maybe it'll be the 25th, maybe the 27th, certainly something on the 26th. But some extra event where you can come and meet me, and we can actually confer about international strategy. So that will be Rome around the 26th of October, and then the Frankfurt area. Now, this interesting thing here is that Friedberg is close to Bad Nauheim, and what everybody has to know about Bad Nauheim is this is where Elvis Presley did his military service. So in the center of Bad Nauheim, you have the Elvis Presley Platz, with a suitable memorial or monument to his presence there. So Stadthalle Friedberg, F-I-R-E-D-B-E-R-G, and you can find this Querdenken, bipartisan thinking, left and right, across the internet. And the idea with this is some people don't like this, right? Some people say, oh, the left and right, that doesn't mix. Well, we have to try anything at this point, so I'm happy to see what can be done. Now, concerning COINTELPRO, I just have to make a general statement here. Right? I'm finding out that this idea of COINTELPRO 2.0 is a lot of people have cognitive difficulties in accepting it, and obviously it's got to do with fear. It's got to do with a desire not to be in the world where there is such a massive COINTELPRO 2.0. COINTELPRO stalking. These are the realities of our time. You cannot be in politics. You cannot do anything if you're not a realist. And we have to be great realists. The reality is the U.S. intelligence agencies, FBI in particular, but CIA and so forth, NSA, they are carrying out this massive illegal surveillance, to be sure, but also harassment, nagging, sabotage, the attempt to drive you out of politics. You cannot close your eyes to this. Remember Cass Sunstein, the guy who first introduced WikiLeaks and Assange to the world in the pages of the Washington Post in the mid-aughties, is the guy who called for cognitive infiltration of the various anti-war, 9/11 Truth, and other movements. So they've been doing that. Now, a couple of interesting things have come to light. Assange, it has now been revealed in the last several weeks, Assange's graduate school and Assange's studies, his research, were financed, paid for, by the National Security Agency and by DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. So Assange helped decisively by the U.S. intelligence community. This, of course, is typical. Now, what I think we're dealing with is an attempt by the limited hangout controllers, by the mind benders, by the officials who run the MK, mind control apparatus of our time. They're retooling both Assange and Snowden. Two interesting things just in the past couple of weeks. This past week, we're told that the British police, they're so tired and they've been spending so much money keeping that watch, that cordon outside of the Ecuadorian embassy in London where Assange has been staying, that those police are going to pack it in. They're going to go home. So Assange could now be spirited out of there, and with a little help from his military intelligence friend there, the guy that lived in the east of England and had him staying in that wonderful palatial estate, Assange could soon be operating somewhere or other in the world. And then Snowden. Snowden got his first Twitter account. Isn't that wonderful? And how did he do it? The problem with this is, if your name is Edward Snowden and you essentially come to Twitter in the end of September, I think it's September 29th of the year 2015, what are your chances of getting the Twitter handle at Edward Snowden? Or I guess it's at Snowden. The title, the name of the thing is Edward Snowden, and the handle is at Snowden. What do you think your chances are? Well, this is so strange, right, and so suspicious, so éclatant, that the London Guardian, which is one of the cheerleaders, right, one of the groupies for Snowden, right, part of his media cartel, part of Assange's too, I guess, they have to explain how it is that Snowden can get this Twitter handle, and the way they say it is the Twitter handle Snowden and the name Edward Snowden had been unused for 3 years. But now that Edward Snowden wanted to make a comeback and get these things, Twitter agreed to give it to him. Boy, oh boy. What kind of special treatment is that? Is this what happens to a hounded and persecuted whistleblower, some guy who is in the crosshairs of the intelligence community who are trying to shut him down? Well, of course not. This is what you get from Edward Snowden. So we got to focus on these people and try to see if Assange and Snowden both go in motion and start doing something out of the ordinary at the same time. That's really important. So, covert assets infiltrate everywhere. These are the trolls. And as you know, I gave a typology of the false flag operation. I gave a typology of the limited hangout operation. I will be developing a typology of COINTELPRO and COINTELPRO stalking. See you next week on World Crisis Radio.